Hey guys, we want to talk a little bit about music theory, particularly as it pertains to writing worship songs. Now, worship music is its own genre, its own unique musical style. That means it has a certain music theory that would be applied to that style. Essentially, when we think about worship music, we want to think about writing songs that are singable, that are easy to remember, that a congregation can both identify with in terms of its lyrics, but also that they can grab onto in terms of a simple melody and a chord progression that is simple enough to be predictable. Now, predictability, that almost sounds like a bad word in music. Like, I don't want our music to sound predictable. But that predictability is what allows people to learn a melody quickly and understand where a song is going so that they can engage with the song quickly and so that it can become a meaningful part of their worship experience. That means complex chords in music theory is likely something we would avoid in writing some of our worship songs. It doesn't mean those creative chord progressions don't have a place, but maybe just not in the context of worship music, where we're asking our entire congregation to join in and identify and embrace a certain song. And so when we think about music theory, we want to think about what kinds of chords fit particularly well in a worship song. And so we're going to look at that together. And as you write in your groups, these are some things to think about. So I'm going to jump over here for a second. And we're going to look at chord families as they pertain to worship. Every key in music has its own family of chords that fit within that key. So just like in the real world, the Wilkie family, we have certain members of our family that fit. Those are different members than your family. Your family, you have a different mom and dad and a different son and daughter. But each family, we kind of have similar components. You usually have a mom and a dad and a son and a daughter and maybe a dog and a cat. Things like that. We all understand that a son is a son and a daughter is a daughter and a mom is a mom and dad is a dad. Music theory is actually really similar in terms of worship. So every key in music, which essentially is just, the letters A through G. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Those are our main keys, and then with the sharps and flats. So and we can look at a musical keyboard to know what those are. So if this is an A, the keys we have in music are A, and then A sharp or B flat. This has two names. Every black key has two names, by the way. And if you wonder why do we call it sharp and flat, that's a different music theory lesson. A sharp or B flat, B, C, and then C sharp or D flat, and then D, and then D sharp or E flat, E, F, I'm going to make this look more like an E, E, F, and then F sharp or G flat, and G. Those are all the keys that we have in music to draw from. So while there are multiple different combinations you can have in music, typically, we're still limited by a finite amount of keys. So it's not completely infinite in terms of the possibilities. There's a finite amount of keys we can draw from, and each key kind of has its own scale and its own family of chords that fit within that scale. So in worship, we want to tend to stay in the family. And that's kind of the basic rules of most worship songs. Stay in the family. When you get out of the family, what it does is it creates sometimes a dissonance that's not only difficult to play, but oftentimes difficult for the congregation to grab onto. So our basic kind of rule is stay within the family. Now there can be exceptions to that rule, but it has to really fit well and have a distinct purpose, and also has to fit in a way that you can still easily predict and identify the note that's coming. So each key has its own family. So just like in the Wilkie family, there's a mom, a dad, 3 daughters, a son, a dog, and a cat. Maybe your family has a different configuration, but still you know what a son is. You know what a daughter is. You know what a dog is. You know what a cat is. You know what a mom and dad are. So each family in music theory has kind of the main components of the family that we want to stay in are the 1, 4, 5, 6, 2, and sometimes the 3, which is a minor 3. But we'll talk about that. So what this means is whatever key we're in, there's a certain formula we follow. And so the 1 chord is always the root, or in other words, the name of that key. If you're in the key of C, then the root of this family is the 1 chord is C itself. So the 1 in the key of C is the C chord, C major. That's so the capital numbers here, the capital Roman numerals stand for major chords, and the little Roman numerals stand for minor chords. So in each family, the 1 chord is a major, the 4 chord, it's the 4th of C, and I'll explain what that means in a second. And that's a major, and the 5th is a major, the 5th of C, the 6th is a minor, the 2 chord, and I put it separate. It's out of order because we call this the dominant minor and the subdominant minor. So the 2nd is also minor, and the minor 3rd, which we don't see as often, but it still fits sometimes. There's a few songs that have it, and it can work. So what that means is, in the key of C, a C scale, we're going to use these, I'm going to use orange here, okay? So orange shows you what a C scale is. Every scale has the same formula. The way we find a major scale, and all these chord families are based off the idea of a major scale. So major scale always follows the same formula. And it's based on intervals or steps. And so in music theory, a major scale follows this formula, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. And that counts as steps. And so what I mean by that is on a piano, if you move from one note to another note, we count that in terms of, it's an interval or steps. If I move from this A up to this B flat or A sharp, that is one step. But if I move up here to this, even though it's the very next white key, because there are 2 keys in between it, that's 2 steps. Or 2 steps is called a whole step, okay? So whole. So if we're starting then on the key of C, I'll put my notes down here. If you follow the formula, you'll see it works. That we start on C and then we go whole. So that means we skip this one and go here. And then we're going to go whole again. So skip this one, land on E. The next one is a half. So, oh good, we just go right there to the F because there was no note in the middle there. That's how a keyboard is designed. And then again, following the formula, that lands us on G for the next hole. The next hole lands us on A. The next hole lands us on B. And a half step lands us on C. You should always finish a scale on the note you started on. So, changing keys then, just to demonstrate that the scale works, we're going to do a D scale. So starting on a D, start on a D, and we do a whole step. A whole step lands us on E. Next whole step will land us way up here then on F sharp. Okay, and then we have a half step, which puts us on G. Now we have a whole step, which puts us on A. Whole step puts us then up on C sharp, because you see we skipped that. And then a half step, which lands us back on D. So you don't need to memorize all your scales, but you just need to understand that this formula is where these families are derived from. What I mean by that then is if we are going back to a C scale, move those little purple dots there, or orange dots off my purple keys. Back to a C scale, which are all these notes written in orange there. They're white keys. C is an easy key to play because it's all the white keys. If you'll count then the steps, in the key of C, this is the 1, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. F becomes the major 4. 5, this is the 5th note in the scale, so that's the 5th. And A is always an A minor. And the 2 is the 2nd note of the scale, so D is always a D minor in the key of C. And E is typically an E minor in the key of C. Now, all this is important because then you don't have to figure out every time like, oh, I got to count, I got to know my scale. The easiest way to remember is to start memorizing your chord families. Basically, like if you hear, Jeff Wilkie, you'll know that he belongs in my family. You know because you've kind of memorized that, oh, Jeff, that's Christy's husband. Unless you don't know Jeff, then that's kind of, that analogy doesn't work as far as that goes. Anyway, an easier way to remember this is to start thinking about memorizing your chord families. So if you are in the key of C, it helps for you to just know instinctively, because you've memorized, that in the key of C, these are the chords that fit in that family. These are the members of the C family. Those are the members of that family. So if you're in the key of G, for example, it's helpful for me to know that in the key of G, which most guitar players who play acoustic, we just slide our capo around and we play these shapes. We play the 1 and the 4, the 5, and the minor 6, and the minor 2, and the minor 3. And I just know that because I've memorized the key of G, or I can figure it out by counting the notes on the scale. So that's where this theory comes from. These families come from the idea of they're derived from the major scale. It's important for you to know then when you're playing in worship, when you're writing worship songs, that you stay in the family. You can look up these chord families anywhere online. You can see, what are the chords for the key of A? Okay, well, again, because I've memorized this stuff, I know that 1, 4, 5 in the key of A is A, D, and E. This is F sharp minor, this is B minor, and this is C sharp minor. I know that, but that's because I've practiced and memorized it. Now, not all of you guys have had all that time to memorize your chord families, and I don't necessarily expect you to learn that, although it's a very helpful tool that I do recommend, because it'll make playing songs and writing songs so much easier. But if you're starting in a key, you just want to make sure you stay in that chord family. And so as we're writing, try to remember, okay, if I'm starting and I'm strumming an A chord, and I'm humming a melody and it's going with the A chord, what then are the other chords that are probably going to be in this song? And trying to stay within that list. So if I'm strumming along and I'm starting a melody in the key of A, then the other chords that are probably going to show up in my song are these chords that belong in this family. And they're based on the major scale of A. Again, you can look those up online. Chord families is pretty easy to find. Just Google chord families and you'll come up with a link. So, first rule, worship for songwriting, let's try to stay in the chord families. Okay? Now, a couple other things, then you also have to chart your songs. When you write your songs out, it's helpful for us to know, hey, what chords are you playing there? So, you make sure you always write the little lowercase m for your minor chords. And then there's some other chord terms that I want to familiarize all of our team with, just making sure we understand what these chords mean. Okay, so we have our major chord, which is basically, it means the 1, the 3, and the 5 in that scale. So, again, if we're looking at chords now, we're looking at what makes up a chord, not what makes up the chord family. That's a different category there. So what makes up the chord. So a major is the 1, 3, and 5 of any key. So in the key of C, the 1, 3, 5. So a C major chord is a C, E, and a G, and that's a C major chord. Okay. A minor chord is when you take the third and you flat it Flat means go back a half a step. So you flat the third. So in the case of C minor, a C minor chord would be C, E flat, and G. Hope that makes sense. Okay? And then, what's a slash chord? A slash chord is when in your left hand you're playing a bass note that's different from the chord that you're playing in your right hand. So, or that maybe the acoustic is playing a D major chord, but the bass player is playing a different note underneath it. And we write that as a slash chord, and we call that, so like maybe the bass player is playing an F sharp while the guitar player is playing a D with their right hand, or maybe the keyboard player is playing a D with their right hand, but their left hand is playing an F sharp in the bass. And so we call those slash chords, and they're written like this. So, and this is not a whole chord of F sharp, it's just the F sharp note. Okay, so that means on the top, the chord is made up of a D major chord, but down here, just the bass note would be an F sharp. Okay, that's what a slash chord is. It's a different bass note. Okay, that kind of anchors that chord. We see that a lot in walks, walk ups and walk downs, and transitionary chords. We see a lot of those slash kind of chords. What's a suspended? If you see an S after it, a suspended means that if I was playing a C chord, here's my C, my little keyboard here. So a C chord is a C, typically an E and a G. That's your major. But a suspended means that you play, it'll usually say sus4. Sometimes they'll say a sus2, but it means that rather than the 3, you play a 4. So a suspended chord is a 1, 4, 5. And if ever you see a number next to a chord, like a C2 or a C4, a C6, it means you still play the 3, but you add this other number of the scale. So this would be like a C2 would be a 1, 2, 3, and 5. So you're still playing a major chord, but you're just adding another number. A major 7 then, going back to, I'm going to use this keyboard up high to show you this. A major 7 is the 7th note in the major scale is included in your chord. So in this case, you have your major chord, C major chord, C, E, G, but your 7th note is a B. Okay, and so a C major 7 means you take the 7th note of the major scale and you include it. So in this case, it'd be 1, 3, 5, 7. But sometimes you just see it C7 and it doesn't say C major 7. It just says C7. And what that is, C7, a 7 chord, is you do the 1, the 3, the 5, and you flat the 7. So it would be, in this case, a B flat. So those are chord names. And so one thing we want you to think about then is naming your chords when you create a chord chart and naming them accurately, so that the rest of us then can understand what your musical intention was in the chord progression that supports the melody you've written. Obviously, you can have a lot of different chords that would still support a melody. And so we want to make sure that we have the right chords named in your chord chart. So hopefully that puts us all on the same page, might help you out in your writing a little bit. And if you have any questions, make sure you get in touch with me. Thanks, bye.